Welcome to Section B of Lesson 1-3. We are now going to discuss angles. We name an angle by naming a point on one side, then the vertex. Ooh, might help find a pen, right? Then the vertex, then a point on the other side. We write it by drawing an angle symbol in front of the three letters. So for example, angle ABC, we would say out loud angle ABC. And if I were to actually draw this angle, looking at this, B has to be the vertex because it's in the center, and then A and C must be on the other two rays. The vertex point must be the middle letter. The other 2 points don't matter. For example, angle BCA and angle CBA, angle ABC and angle CBA name the same angle, but angle CAB names a different angle where A is the vertex instead of B. If a point is the vertex of only one angle, we can name it with just a letter. So the angle I drew before, we could have labeled just angle B. However, if I then went in and I added another ray here, I could no longer call the first angle angle B because there are actually 3 angles here that have the vertex of B. If I'm looking to go through some shorthand and not have to write out as much, I could then number my angles 1 and 2 and refer to these angles as angle 1 or angle 2. So another way to look at it. When we talk about the measurement of an angle, remember we measure angles in degrees, and we write an M in front of our usual notation, and we say out loud the measure of angle ABC. So I want you now to pause and think about how this notation is different from the angle notation and explain it below. Now let's look at congruent figures. The symbol for congruence is an equal sign with a tilde on top. For example, we would say that 2 segments are congruent by writing AB, congruent symbol, CD. For angles, we would write angle ABC is congruent to angle DEF. We need to make sure to use the correct symbol. Measurement or measures are equal, whereas objects are congruent. So AB is equal to CD implies that the actual measurements are congruent. So measure of AB is equal to measure of CD. But segment AB is congruent to segment CD, shows that the physical objects themselves are congruent. We could do the same thing with angles. The measure of angle A equals the measure of angle B, but angle A would be congruent to angle B. We need to be able then to read different types of markings on diagrams to know if we're talking about things that are congruent. We use tick marks to show that segments are congruent. If we have more than one pair of congruent segments on a diagram, we increase the number of tick marks. So in this diagram, AB would be congruent to BC, which would be congruent to DC because they all have 1 tick mark. And then AC would be congruent to BC because they have 2 tick marks. The diagrams do not have to be 100% accurate. Placing tick marks on a diagram ensures that those segments are intended to be congruent. So if I gave you this diagram here, and I marked all 3 of these sides with a single tick mark, then you have to take it as truth that all 3 sides of that triangle are congruent. Congruent angles, we use arcs to show that they are congruent. Again, we increase the number of loops as we have more and more pairs that are congruent. and they must be treated as congruent. So if I had two angles, this guy and this guy, and I looped both of them, you'd have to take them as congruent, even though they don't look congruent. We designate things to be right angles by using the corner box like so. Again, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate in the diagram. If I tell you it's a right angle, it's a right angle. But the reverse of that is also true. If I don't tell you it's a right angle, if I were to give you, for example, this shape here, which I really don't want to be black. Can we change it to blue? No, apparently not. If I gave you this shape here, and I didn't mark any of the corners, you cannot assume that any of those corners are right angles. Even if I marked this congruent to this, you still can't assume that they're right angles. You can only then know that they're congruent to each other. So you have to be very, very careful about that. Thank you very much for watching Section B. Please go through and make sure you've done all of the try-me's and filled in all of the appropriate blanks. Thank you.